All right, recording is started. And this is the August 26th, 2021 Crossplane community meeting. Feel free to add yourself to the agenda, the attendees list there if you feel so inclined. Otherwise, we can add you on later on, as it were. So let's dive on into milestones, releases, and all that sort of stuff. So the first thing to pay attention to is that earlier this week, we did a series of patch releases for 1.3, 1.2, and 1.1, all the currently supported releases of Crossplane. So in the release notes are all included right here. I think Hassan and Alper, you all were running that release. Do you just want to give us a quick update about like the important issues? You don't have to go through every issue, but like the important stuff that was included in those patch releases?
Yeah, sure. I think one of them was run by Aaron. Like there are 3 releases, and all like run by all 3 of us. Everyone had write one of them. So actually, like the updates are the fixes and merge PRs in master, which makes sense to include into the patch releases. So I cannot like immediately comment on each and every ticket right now here. If others could comment on that, that would be appreciated. Because I just like followed the difference and marked the new PRs included in the new branch.
I can comment on 2509. That was an issue that a few folks brought up related to how often we update in the package manager. So when you install either a configuration or a provider, it brings either in the configurations case XRDs and compositions, and in the provider's case CRDs. For the pretty much the existence of the package manager, we have every minute ensured that all of those resources are matching and up to date. The issue with that is the Kubernetes API server, or specifically the API extensions controllers in Kubernetes, are late initializing some fields on a CRD potentially. And the composition controllers in Crossplane are also making some modifications to the XRDs and compositions. So we have basically superfluous updates on those happening all the time. And so like it's not just a no op, right? We're actually issuing an update, but it's kind of ineffectual. It's not interrupting any usage, but it just issues a ton of updates. And you can imagine, you know, as we have providers with like almost closing in on like 1,000 CRDs for a large cloud provider, that's a lot of updates we're issuing all the time. So instead, what we do now is we don't requeue on a successful reconcile, and we basically say we've installed these, we've made sure that they are created correctly, and if something else takes control and late initializes them, it's now their responsibility. And instead, we only requeue in a provider case on if the deployment that's running the controllers gets in an unhealthy state or changes in any way, or if a controller config that configures that deployment is changed. So it basically reduces the total number of updates. That's not to say that we'll never update, right? We still have an update in the case that like the deployment changes, we'll still make an update for all of those CRDs. But you know, that's kind of one of the guarantees of the package manager, but it's basically going to cut it down to making those updates extremely less frequently, like an order of magnitude less frequently.
Yeah, awesome, Dan. I think that, excuse me, yeah, that sounds like that was one of the important issues that went on in that release. So with 1.3 and 1.2 and 1.1. So thank you for commenting on that one there. And thanks to Hassan, Alper, and Aaron for then running those 3 patch releases as well to get all of those out. I think that's cool to get more folks involved in that and kind of load balance the effort there. We have the 1.4 release coming up as well too next week. So there's more efforts or more opportunities to get involved with getting the releases out. So yeah, let's move ahead to that. So yeah, 1.4 is the release date is still expected to be August 31st. I have not seen any particular reasons or any big blockers or anything that's come up that would delay that. So I think we're still on track for August 31st, getting the release out there. We've got the tracking issue that serves as the checklist here for getting like the whole release process and getting everything out and updated. So that's all ready to go for next week, I think. So let's talk about what's in 1.4 and then also roadmap going forward as well too, because we have some changes that we want for to start putting there to have a better story for our roadmap down the pipeline here, and getting community involvement in there as well too. So let's first talk about 1.4 because that's the next release. That's practical, pragmatic. Let's talk about that real quick. So on the 1.4 board here, you'll see a lot of things in the done column there. And Nick, it looks like maybe you went through and took a pass through cleaning up this board significantly so that it's very clear about what's in the release and what's not. So thank you very much for doing that. I think one of the biggest efforts here and the biggest feature is composition revisions. So Nick did a lot of great effort recently to add support for being able to safely update and roll back your different versions of your compositions, and that is included in the 1.4 release. There's a guide written about how to use it, some practical tips and some of the underlying mechanics there as well too. Nick, is there anything specific you want to add to composition revisions, or we've talked about it, there's a live stream to it as well too. If folks want to learn more, it's in 1.4. Anything else you want to add on to composition revisions specifically?
Yeah, I feel like we've already talked about this maybe at the last community meeting, and since then there was a live stream. So if folks are interested, I recommend searching. I'm guessing if you search YouTube for like Crossplane composition revisions, you'll find that live stream that discusses it in detail.
And there's a direct link to it later on in the.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, okay. Oh, man, we got a whole bunch of updates. Nice. Okay, yeah, in this content section, there's a direct link in here as well. Okay, cool. So yeah, any other notes? Like that's the big feature for 1.4 basically. I think anybody else want to add some highlights here for other things that will be included in the 1.4 release next week, besides what's on what's included in the done column?
Hopefully everything that is included should be in the done column. If everyone knows of anything that is going to ship in this release, just for accounting purposes, it would be awesome to drop links to stuff in the done column. I'm sure there is some interesting stuff in there, but I forget exactly what it is. I know Alpair's got some work in there to support merging instead of replacing objects and arrays when you're patching, which would be super handy.
Nick, I also saw the issue around, I don't see it on the board right. Oh, there it is. In to do the promote lock to V1 beta 1. I think we were aligned on promoting that. I'd be fine to go ahead and move that up a version if folks feel okay with that.
Oh, I was thinking, yeah, that we would do that in V1.4. I just didn't. It's a very trivial, safe change, so I didn't think we have to have it done by like the feature freeze or anything like that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get it done today, just so we have some bake time.
And same with that git ignore thing. I wasn't personally planning on doing that myself, but I do feel that it would be a safe thing to do in this release, or basically at any time. That's kind of, to be fair, something I might should have probably removed from this release, because it's not really a feature that will ship with 1.4 or anything. It's just a thing that we want to do.
Yeah, that's just repository metadata stuff, right? That's not tied to a particular release. It's not an artifact that ships.
Yeah, but I did leave it there because I was figuring that we'd do it this week or next.
Cool. Yeah, I know Taylor was interested in specifically on helping out with that as well too. If we want to ask him to do that one. Okay, cool. Yeah, so 1.4 is going out next week. Definitely excited to get another release out there. You may notice as well too that we're kind of cleaning up the boards and taking a bit of a different approach to how do we specify or describe the roadmap of features as well too. So I wanted to touch on this real quick, that Nick wrote up a proposal for how to do a better job of addressing our roadmap and giving visibility into what's going on down the road here for the Crossplane project. And then Nick took some steps to go ahead and create the board here. Nick, do you want to kind of, since you wrote up this, very well wrote up this proposal here and put together this, do you want to kind of give us a quick update on what our thinking is here, our philosophy?
Yeah, it's intended to address two things. One is just that folks have asked us for a roadmap for what the Crossplane community is doing with Crossplane, what features are planned in future. One thing that's a little unconventional potentially about this roadmap compared to others is there are no, as you can see, looking at it, there are no dates on it. So we're not really promising particular timelines as to when features will be released. But the idea here is the prioritize column is a roughly, so far it's actually just me who prioritized it yesterday, so don't take it as gospel. We still need to get feedback from other folks to make sure these priorities are sort of what the whole community agrees on. But roughly prioritized features or bug fixes or large-ish things that we want to work on at Crossplane. This is a first pass, so one thing I'm not super sure what we want to do here about is, I'm sure there are other things that could be added here, but there's a question of like, do we want every bug and every little issue and whatnot to be in this prioritized column, like mixed in with big initiatives and whatnot? Like, how do we balance those things? I don't want to get it too sort of bloated. And then the other two columns are intended to track. We have some initiatives that just don't really make sense. So you can kind of think about this roadmap board as basically stuff that was already on our release boards, but that probably shouldn't have been. So previously, all of these were in the prioritized column was roughly the proposed column for the releases. And what we found we were doing is we were just taking all the stuff that was proposed for one release. And then if we didn't do it in that release, we just drag it to the next release. So there's just an indefinitely proposed list of work for every release. I found that confusing personally because it comes across as if there's some chance that we're going to do that in any particular release. Similarly, the in design and in progress are intended to be work that, we are working on maybe during the 1.4 timeframe, but there is no commitment, for example, that generic resource references would land in 1.4. And I think going forward, it would actually be a good practice to keep things out of a release milestone while they're in design. That way we can take the time we need to design them. When we finish designing them, we've got agreement, then we can say, okay, we now have an idea of like how big this is, how much work this is. Do we want to commit to put it in 1.4 or 1.5 or like then move it into a particular release? And then so finally, the in progress column is a bit of an interesting one. I was thinking that we would use this for work in progress that is not scoped to a particular release. So some great examples of this are, we want to track that, Muvaf is doing work upstream with the ACK folks to get a bunch of Crossplane features into ACK, but that's not associated with any Crossplane release or even necessarily any provider AWS release. Then we're like working to improve our documentation, for example, specifically how Google index, and that's not associated with any Crossplane release. And a really big one is that most people at Upbound who work full-time on Crossplane at the moment are really heads down working on Terraform-based provider code generation. So an ability to just automatically generate new providers to really increase the provider coverage that Crossplane has. That's actually something we've been working on most of this quarter, and it has been a great way to track that previously because it's not part of core Crossplane, it's not part of any one provider, there wasn't a place to put that initiative. So the general idea is anything that doesn't fit in the release goes on this board. Anything that clearly fits in a release where we can put it on a release board with 80% certainty that it is actually going to ship with that release, or that we actually intend for it to ship with that release when we put it on, then that sort of is how I think we should make that division.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for me here is that, what you said, Nick, of, if you look at the way we were doing our releases, we'd have like 1.3 and it would have a huge column of a bunch of stuff that wasn't really necessarily going to get included in the release. So it was kind of misleading, and it was implicit that it was a backlog, a prioritized backlog, but it was very confusing about that. So I really like having this prioritized list that spans multiple releases. It's not necessarily a commitment of when a particular release something is going to land, but it is giving visibility and insight into the ordering and what we believe is the priority of issues. And then this is definitely an opportunity for folks in the community to weigh in and provide their vote and support for particular issues as well too. And that can always be done by adding a comment or adding a thumbs up reaction to the issue as well too. And then we can kind of keep this prioritized list here in priority order for what the community's needs are. So I think that this is a good place to start doing this across milestones, and it's a longer term roadmap now.
So the proposal issue, I think Jared has linked in the that's what issue 2526. It is closed now, but that would be a great place to provide feedback on this, unless you want to just tell me now or reach out on Slack or something. We did consider having a board with time estimates on them. We like how internally at Upbound, we actually use a process similar to what GitHub does, where they just have a GitHub project broken down by like month or quarter, and they just drag things, columns being months or quarters, and they just drag things around that to reflect when things will land. The tricky thing with Crossplane is, it is a community-driven open source project. We don't really expect our maintainers to, commit to deliver a feature at a particular time around their other other responsibilities. So I also don't feel like I've seen too many open source projects sort of really commit to a roadmap of like, on this month of this year, you will get this feature. I could be wrong, but so feedback definitely wanted on this.
Yeah, thanks for driving this here, Nick, or putting something into place. It's definitely helpful and useful for the community to get visibility into where the project is going. So I think this is really nice. And then I think a final step, Matthias was asking about it earlier today, and pull request is welcome for that too, of what we do with the roadmap.md file at the root of the Crossplane repo. And my proposal or suggestion for that would be to keep that file, because it is the natural place that a lot of people will go to look at roadmap. It is kind of a standardized file, but basically just link to there from the roadmap file to our new roadmap project, which gives the visibility there. And then, maybe like a sentence or two in roadmap.md about our philosophy there. And then, I think that's a good approach to get more eyes towards it as a kind of a launching point to get to the roadmap here.
But no, I suppose not only to the roadmap, but then also to the other release projects. Right.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point, Matthias. Yeah, you can kind of keep that, so we can keep that updated to the release board, the current release that we're working on the board for that. That's a really good point.
You can, would we feel okay if we just you can just link to the projects board on GitHub, which just links to all of them. That way we just don't have to update it every release and remember to go point it at a new URL. We can just be like, folks can figure out what the biggest number is on that list of boards. But I can at least, I'll add a PR now. We can have a little blurb that's like, there's the roadmap board and then there's release boards, and we can say like what the difference is and which ones to go look at and whatnot.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Yeah, I think this is great stuff here. Cool. So yeah, so then there's plenty of opportunities then for folks to weigh in and add their support for issues and what they need to see out of the project. That's the kind of a consistent theme. Let's continue supporting that of giving a voice to everybody to support what they want to see in the project.
Jared, can I wrap back around to something that's potentially v1.4 scoped that I forgot about until just now?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Live edit. There is there's pull request 2525 from username Zodi Bob, whose name is Ben. It's quite simple, and he mentioned that if we would consider making a exception for it to go into 1.4, he would appreciate that, but he is not, he understands that we don't necessarily want to do that. I could go either way. I don't think we really made an exception to our feature freeze before, but it is kind of apart from a bunch of, it's a relatively small change apart from boilerplate. I would like to get Dan's review on it because it is part of the package manager code that he understands really well. But just something I wanted to call out. We don't need to make a decision on now. I'm totally happy to punt it to 1.5. Just wanted to represent for Ben, who asked nicely if we could make an exception.
Yeah, I won't spend too much time on this, but I took a quick look through it. It looks pretty good. I'm pretty staunchly in the camp of that we should not include this. It is not that big of a change, but it's a way to modify the root certs, right? Which is like, you know, kind of a scary thing potentially. I mean, I believe it's being done correctly here. The transport's being set up, but I do think it is kind of a sensitive thing to include in a release during code freeze. The other thing I'll mention that's kind of informing this decision is you can achieve this functionality has been already noted by just mounting your own bundle of certs. You'd have to construct it right from your existing ones plus the other one you wanted to support. But you can mount that on the pod already and achieve this functionality, albeit in a bit of a more hacky way. So yeah.
Okay, no worries. Will you just drop a comment on and let him know that probably gonna take a bit more time on this, or you know how the things that you just said.
One follow-up point on that is we should go ahead and cut the branch because theoretically during code freeze, we should have the v1.4 branch already existing, or the release 1.4 one, so that if this one, we reviewed it and merged it, right, that could go ahead and take place. Basically, we're not holding PRs because we're in code freeze for another release.
Yeah, we actually don't have a volunteer yet to run the release. We have the team at Upbound that works primarily on Crossplane as their sprint planning meeting after this meeting today. And I'm going to ask, I'm not going out of that meeting unless someone from Purple Squad volunteers to do this release, and then that will be their responsibility.
And yeah, that's definitely a really good point, though, that, you know, it's not, you don't really have we're not really code freezing if we haven't got a release branch yet. So that's a really good point. Let's follow up on that today after we get an owner for the release.
Yeah, just for context there, the only reason we're doing that in a private Upbound forum is just in practice, all of the current maintainers of Crossplane are in that team. So I would ask for the volunteer.
The core repo at least.
Yeah, for Crossplane, Crossplane.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's try to pick up the pace now. So we're about halfway through, and then I think a lot of things were added here. They might not be deep content, but let's keep moving on here. So we've got the 1.4 release coming out next week. We've got the roadmap in place. So then in this section here, Dan, did you add this package rev?
I did. It's kind of like a metadata change. It was very small. Nick approved it. It's been merged. I think we can.
Oh, good. So nothing to discuss.
Yep.
All right. Sounds good. Okay, so that's core Crossplane stuff. Let's move down to the providers now. And so let's visit. You know, like the point of this section really is around you know, first of all, big updates for each of the providers, and then secondly, kind of deciding, getting a sense of releases for the providers as well too, since those are done on a different schedule from the core Crossplane repository. So let's kind of revisit each provider there. I don't think Diego's on the call this time, but he did add a note to what he would like to see in AWS. So I don't know if Muaf is on the call, but Aaron, I think, is on the call. Or anybody else? Yes. So do we already review this PR? I have not looked at the status of this myself.
So this PR has not been reviewed yet. It's implementing a whole new service. It's currently triaged as a medium size because it's implementing a whole service, but it looks like at a first glance, it looks pretty good. I've gone ahead and assigned myself, and I'll give it a review before the end of week. And if we're, you know, assuming everything works fine, it doesn't need any major changes, it will probably be included in the next release. It can go ahead and merge. But that's based on review.
Awesome, Aaron. Thank you so much for doing that. Okay, cool. So then let's keep with the provider AWS updates then. Yeah, we don't have to go through every issue, but no. You know, it's good to have them here. And then high level, do you want to kind of give us an update, Aaron, then about progress on AWS and where we would be in relation to a next release going out? It seems like spoiler alert. It seems like there's a lot going on, so doing a release soon makes sense then.
Yeah, so I've listed the PRs that were merged in the last 2 weeks since our last community meeting. Couple of new instance types, a couple of new resources, and a couple of bug fixes to different to other resources. There's a breaking change. I think it was just barely outside of the 2-week window, but we did introduce a breaking change for VPCs, where we moved the API group over. All of the manually created VPC resources have now been given their own API group to differentiate them from the code generated. I should add that to this. The current status on Provider AWS, we have 41 open PRs. We have started triaging them, trying to get the small PRs done quickly so we can move on to the larger ones. We've also added a new maintainer to the project to try and deal with the backlog. 14 of the PRs are have been in motion in the last 2 weeks. They've gotten review, they've gotten comment, and there are 2 issues that have been active. One of which is Provider AWS is making too many requests to RDS endpoint, and the other one being provider attempts to remove tags from the node group. All the other issues are still just sitting there for past the last 2 weeks. But that's the current status of Provider AWS. There have been 24 merges to mainline since the last release, so I think we're justified in making a new release, and I think it's more than a patch based on that change we made to the VPC resources and changing their API group. We should give it a full version bump.
Just another thing to throw in there, Aaron, that is, I'm working on 2 separate race conditions in Crossplane Runtime that, as far as I know, primarily affect Provider AWS at this point. They theoretically affect any managed resource, but we've only observed them in Provider AWS. I would ideally like to get that update to Crossplane Runtime done before we ship Provider AWS. There is potentially a risk that that might be an update to Provider Runtime after we ship Crossplane 1.4, then update Provider Runtime, sorry, Crossplane Runtime, then Provider AWS. But I guess please, someone come hit me up before you release the new version of Provider AWS. I'd love to get this bug fix out there for the folks who are waiting on it.
Okay. I mean, do you think it's going to be in by Tuesday? So that we could do the bump to the dependency and then start testing Provider AWS?
Potentially. I think okay. So I have 2 different, the slightly more context is, there's 2 different problems. I have 2 different working pull requests. Hassan gave me some good feedback that they could potentially be merged into 1 pull request. I'm about halfway through doing that. So sort of making the 2 fixes a little bit more of a cohesive whole. I think I can have that done today or tomorrow. So, but whether it's reviewed and merged is maybe the thing. If we can get a sort of a quick review and people don't feel like it's too worrying on Monday, then we can get it done by Tuesday.
Right. I will just go grab the issue from Crossplane Runtime, and make sure we're tracking it.
Thank you, Aaron, and thanks, Nick. Yeah, a lot going on in AWS, no question about that. Good to see that, and we'll get a release out sometime soon as well, too. So GCP, Provider GCP, Hassan, do you want to give us a high-level update as well there, too?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, actually, there were a couple of PRs reviewed within this 2-week time frame, and there were a couple of merged PRs, and like I've tried to list the important ones here. One is a bug fix for bucket lifecycle field. Interestingly, 2 like bugs opened for the same issue by different people, as far as I know. So we provided a fix for that. And also a community member, I think it's Gabriel Herrero, introduced resource record sets for DNS. This is also something like a top requested resource. So this PR is also reviewed and merged. I also checked the existing bugs and issues and bugs, and there are 2 top priority or bugs that needs attention I can talk about. One is Cloud SQL Instance keeps modifying the instance. This is actually a pretty kind of a pretty common case we see when there is a difference between the resource on the provider side versus on our desired spec. I remember there were some recent discussion on how to make the difference more visible with provider logs versus events. I think if or once we have such a feature available, it would be much easier to identify the root cause of these sort of problems. So this is one issue. The other one is, I think, like most of us are already aware that like GK cluster, actually Google deprecates basic out after Kubernetes 1.18. So Aaron has provided a fix on provider helm sites, which were, I think, planned to be moved on Crossplane Runtime, so that other providers or other consumers could reuse the thing that is implemented there. Yeah, this is also about that. Yeah, that's actually all the updates on provider GCP sites. I am not sure about how it relates to making a release with Daniel's work with provider GCP beta. I couldn't have a chance to check that, and what would it mean to have a provider GCP new version and provider GCP beta new version. So this is maybe an open item to check for myself. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, the basic thing is that I need to write down what the changes would be like for moving from one to the other. Yeah, other than that, we can sync up and make sure everything's aligned on that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Awesome, Hassan. Thank you for the update on provider GCP. And then provider Azure as well too. Looks like we got a couple updates there as well too. Alper, do you want to get us a high-level summary of those two?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So a bug fix has been merged that fixes, we get a wrong admin user password in the connection secret for PostgreSQL server. Actually, when we delve into the details of this issue, quite different than from provider AWS or provider GCP. We make asynchronous calls here. So the Azure SDK for Go provides asynchronous APIs for updating and deleting resources and creating them, of course. So my observation is that the bug that causes this specific issue with PostgreSQL Server, in fact, affects other resources as well, because we use similar mechanisms. We interact with the Azure SDK for Go in a similar manner. So this issue also affects other resources. However, most probably we have observed this, and there's an explicit issue for PostgreSQL Server because we generate a password, an initial admin user password, and since we cannot prevent multiple create calls, making multiple create calls, we potentially generate multiple passwords that are not consistent with the SQL Server being provisioned. So we may have a long-term effort here, to have a better interaction with Azure SDK for Go. That's why I'm mentioning about it. But we have done some experiments, multiple runs with PostgreSQL Server, and the specific issue seems to be solved there. So I could not reproduce the issue with the fix. Apart from that, then has merged the global poll interval flag, similar to other providers. We now have the poll interval with provider AWS, provider Azure, excuse me. Another PR is open, which introduces a PostgreSQL Server configuration resource. It's under review. Yes, this one introduces support for configuring a PostgreSQL server.
Oh, so that's all the extra configuration and stuff that beyond like the properties that get exposed at the high level. That's like all the additional configuration values.
Yes, that's correct. So
Nice.
there was an open issue for this. We cannot right now configure PostgreSQL server parameters, and they are represented as configuration objects in ARM. So after some technical discussions, it turns out that we need to model this as a managed resource. So this PR is for doing that.
I like Mofik's comment too. Thank you for working on this challenging resource.
Yeah, why I think why Mofak, said that is the model is not consistent, meaning that, for example, in the Azure SDK for Go, there is no delete call, because whenever you create a PostgreSQL server instance, these configuration objects apparently become available. But what's wrong about it is if you have never configured it, then RAM returns a 404, and we can call the external create method because we observe that the configuration object doesn't exist. However, if it's manipulated once, even if you reset it to the default value, and even if you reset the source of it, which means that whether a user has overridden its value or it's the default value provided by the system, in that case, the source becomes system managed. Even if you reset its state, Azure Resource Manager does not return 404. So there were a couple of tricks that we need to do. Yeah, that was the tricky part about it. There's another issue for adding AKS configuration parameters, and the node pool support. I think this will become important in the short term. We might give some attention here.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's been a fair amount of folks asking for this resource, so that's it's awesome that somebody from the community is contributing it. That's fantastic. Okay, and then Alper, you had a note here too about maybe updating the version of the SDK for Azure.
Yes, I observed that we are using an Azure SDK for Go. The version looks like to be from 2017. There's a new version of it. Maybe we can discuss whether we should update it or not.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to consider there is do we have a good understanding of any breaking changes, changes to functionality, changes to like the programming model, or any of that stuff that would be challenging to consume, or like that we would have to do a lot of work to get to integrate with. Do you have any idea of that yet, Alper?
No, I didn't check.
Yeah, that sounds like a good first step to understand of what's the surface area of breaking changes, or the delta, the difference between what we're using now and what we would have to integrate to. Yeah, I think in general it's nice to update our resources, but yeah, we can make a measured assessment of performing that once we kind of have a better idea of what the cost is, or the risk as well too. Maybe even more importantly, the risk of upgrading this too.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thanks for the update, Alper. Appreciate it. Okay, cool. So that's 1.4, all the providers and their upcoming releases as well too. Then any other topics here that on upcoming releases or milestones before we move into community topics? Aaron, I think I'm just going to make you editor to the doc as well too. Let me streamline that for you. Okay, so yep, so we got the plan for our releases coming up. A lot of stuff going on with providers as well too. Thank you everybody for all the contributions there and ownership of those providers and helping out the community. That's been really, really helpful. So we got as usual here now, we got a bunch of awesome content that Victor and others have been creating around Crossplane. So we have direct links here for a number of various videos and podcasts as well too that have been put out recently. So a couple ones around, Nick was talking about the composition revisions. We were talking about this earlier. That's the big feature in 1.4. And this is a live stream that Nick and Victor did together to explain how it works, show a demo, things like that. So you can check out that the recording from that there. Victor made a couple good videos. I think I haven't gotten a chance yet to watch this one, the automated drift detection one. Victor, I think you did, is that when you did a little bit of like, not really chaos testing, but kind of monkey around with some changes and see what happens? That's that video.
Exactly. I mean, I did want to make real chaos testing experiments in that video, but it turned out that all three tools that I want to use don't really do well infra, are mostly focused on applications. So I gave up and just did it manually, kind of like, hey, how about I destroy this thing and see what happens?
Yeah, that's on my list, on my watch later list to go check that one out as soon as I can, because that one sounds fun.
Victor, that's really funny you say that, because having run a lot of disaster recovery exercises, a lot of companies is necessary. Every time you do it, all the engineers are like, let's set up automatic chaos engineering and all these tools to do it. And I'm always like, just break something manually first. You will learn a ton. Next month, we can automate it all. Like first, just turn off the database and see what happens.
Exactly.
Right on. And then I also got a chance Victor also created some content around policies and using Caverno to do that as well too, which is definitely interesting to see, and then kind of understanding how Caverno's approach differs from open policy agents and seeing other options for policies in the ecosystems. That's definitely interesting too. And then Dan and I were on a podcast for the changelog called Ship It, a new podcast we're doing there. We're kind of talking about Crossplane project and some of Ship It's or changelogs, I guess, infrastructure that they want to be running on Crossplane as well too. So that was a good episode. That Dan doesn't like to listen to himself, but I listened to the whole thing because I wanted to hear myself talk. So I listened to it right away. Cool. So yeah, that's all the latest content there. Every community meeting, we have a bunch of new cool stuff to talk about and show off there. So thanks everybody for the contributions there, and Victor's doing some amazing work on that stuff. So thank you so much for that. News on incubation is we got all the votes that we need for incubation. We've been talking about this since March. Going through the process, and now we have gotten the votes from the Technical Oversight Committee, sufficient votes to be approved to move to incubation. So that is complete, and we're done with that. And we'll be announcing the move. The CNCF will be making the announcement about the promotion to incubation there. I think probably early next week. We're drafting up a blog post announcement, PR, press release sort of stuff around that. So that'll be announced next week. But hooray for getting that done, and thank you for all the efforts from everybody on making that incubation movement happen. It'll be nice to soon move this from the template for our agenda doc, because it's been on here for like months. Okay, cool. And then items of community interest, interesting discussions, interesting observations, interactions within the community that folks have been having. Aaron, you added this item here about adding Carl as a maintainer to AWS, which is fantastic. Yeah, Carl's been quite a contributor in AWS and opening issues, providing pull requests and stuff. So it's great to recognize him in that role as well too. Aaron, anything else to add on that one?
No, Carl? Happy to have him aboard. Welcome, Carl.
Yeah, welcome indeed, Carl. Has anybody else conversations or observations in Slack, like any recent interactions with the community for things that are in high demand, patterns we're seeing, any interesting interactions with the community that people want to highlight here? Does anybody, I know people are using their own compositions. Is anybody noticing any patterns there, or issues that people are running into? I think Nick, you opened an issue recently to kind of document some of the patterns or gotchas or pain points for writing your own compositions.
Yeah, I did. That's I don't know what issue it is, but it's one of the top ones on Crossplane /Crossplane at the moment. In fact, there's a labeled docs that we did a bit of grooming the other day. So if you search for Crossplane issues labeled docs, that's generally a place that would like feedback at the moment on any of those, which includes that issue that Jared just referenced.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, document composition patterns and gotchas. Yeah, that's the one there. Yep. Cool. That's great. All right. We went through a lot of PRs and issues specifically earlier, so I don't see any that are specifically on the agenda here. So I think we're out of agenda topics now. Was there anything else that folks wanted to bring up or make note of while we still have this quorum today? All right, going once. All right, cool. Okay, so I think that's everything for the agenda here, and we'll be getting those 1.4 and provider releases out soon, and happy to continue accepting and taking community feedback on the roadmap. We have that new process there. So a lot of things going on, a lot of activity, a lot of great work around the whole community as well too. So thanks to everybody for all your efforts. Good to see everybody, and we will see everybody in 2 weeks and on Slack as well in the meantime. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Cheers.